So I suggest we move on, and the questions we keep at the end. Huh? I'm pretty sure there are many. So you will tell us about the LHC computing grid, please.
So good afternoon, and thank you. I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint you immediately because the title of my talk is Network Connections. Now, I can actually talk at great length about the computing for LHC because it's a fascinating topic, but I believe this was a networking conference. So if you want to ask me about the computing, I can certainly tell you more later, but the slides that I have are really concentrating on the networking focus, which, as you'll see, is actually really the key to making the computing work. So if computing makes the experiments produce the results, the networking makes the computing work, that makes the networking really important for delivering the physics results. So if I can find the key. So the computing in brief is actually a major problem. The accelerator is predicted to run for 20 years at least. I think there's a schedule for the LHC accelerator out past my retirement. So this is the scope of the duration that we have to maintain computing facilities that will deliver the results that are needed on that timescale. The sheer volume of data is also great. This conveniently shows obsolete storage technology next to an obsolete aircraft, so you can't really tell the amount of data we're producing, but it really is tremendous. We started off saying that we'd be producing around 15 million gigabytes of data, and I think that was the 20-kilometer high stack of DVDs. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that when we stopped taking data in 2012, we were recording more like 30 petabytes of data, 30 petabytes of data a year. And we have stored well over 100 petabytes of data in our storage system at the moment. And as we speak, the accelerator and the experiments are gearing up to produce even more. And they've doubled the trigger rates that they have. They're going to produce 30, 40 petabytes of data in the coming years. So storing that is a problem. And then, of course, you have to analyze it. Now, the number of the fastest processors that we need, 100,000, has remained constant for about 10 years now, and it remains true. As the computing needs of the experiments have increased, fortunately, so computing has delivered us more, but it's come along also with costs in terms of energy consumption and so on that we have to manage. So today we still need 100,000 processors, and it's still true that we cannot fit those in the data center at CERN. We can't fit hundreds of petabytes of data. We can't fit hundreds of thousands of processors in the data center at CERN, and that was known many years ago. So the solution that was sort of developed in the early part of the last decade, between about 2001 and 2005, was a computing grid especially dedicated for the LHC experiments. And the idea was that CERN, as a Tier 0 center in the middle, would send data out to around 10 Tier 1 centers that would share with CERN the custodial responsibility for the data. So we have an entire copy of the data at CERN, but there is at least one, if not two, entire copies of the data at these Tier 1 centers. So if anything did happen to the data center at CERN, then the physicists would be able to reconstruct all of the data set from the data that's stored in these Tier 1 centers. And of course, they contribute, along with the Tier 0, to a lot of the computing which is needed by the experiments. But these are complemented by, it says more than 100, but we have 150 today, Tier 2 centers in universities around the globe. And these also receive the data. The major difference really between a Tier 2 center and a Tier 1 is just that they don't have any tape storage. All of the computing and the disk storage they have plays just as vital a role in the analysis of the data. And this is really important for the physics research today, because when I was a graduate student, I used to have to take a tape back to my university, and I didn't have access to the data. In today's world with the WLCG, with the grid, the physicists at universities that are participating in the program have direct access to the data wherever it is stored in the world, and they can be productive as anybody anywhere else around the planet. So these red and yellow blobs that you see whizzing around the screen behind me showed the data structure or the data transport that we imagined back in 2002, 2003. And that was very much a hierarchical model where data flowed out from the tier 0 to the tier 1s and then flowed out again to the tier 2s. But of all of the components that we started out building this model in 2002, 2003 or so, we were worried the most about the networking capacity. We thought that the network would be a bottleneck. What we found was completely the opposite, that the problems are with the reliability of CPUs, the reliability of disk storage. The network has rarely failed us. Even the other week, there was an ice storm in Hungary, and yet we still had 100 gigabit access to our data center in Budapest, no problem. So really, the criticality of sort of making this work is the network, and it's enabled the physicists to move away from this centralized model where the data goes out from the center to the tier 1s and then to the tier 2s into a model where if your job is sitting at a tier 2 and the local disk storage isn't working, then it can go and find the data and read that actively whilst it's running from another tier 2 and change and find that data. So really, the network is underpinning the reliability of the overall scheme for the physicists. So how does this networking work? Well, the complicated and expensive part is for the tier 1 centers, because there, as I said, these play a fundamental role in the storage of the data, and we have to be able to send the data out to them in real time as it's recorded in the accelerator. So there we have a set of dedicated optical links, so the LHC optical private network that links CERN directly, in many cases via redundant paths, to the different tier 1 centers that you see around the outside. So clearly, if you want to join the game as a tier 1, then there's a big investment to connect to the optical private network. The good news is that to participate as a tier 2 or even a tier 3 in a university, together with the NRENs around the world, we've developed the LHC open network environment that really facilitates the connection of universities and of research institutes into the global network so that traffic to and from CERN is identified and can flow smoothly through the network to CERN, to the tier 1s, to other tier 2s. Now this is a complicated picture, so the rather simpler one that shows how this works is on the slide here, which really just shows that there's a hierarchy of connections again. The tier 2 sites connect to their local NRENs, which in turn connect through to the continental NRENs, such as ASREN, I hope in the future, which would enable traffic from Middle Eastern tier 2s to flow through the ASREN and then through Géant to CERN, so that